Hieroglyphic writing is one of the most recognizable and greatest achievements of ancient Egyptian civilization. Whether carved in stone on iconic monuments, painted on the walls of tombs, or written in ink on papyrus, such writing was pervasive throughout the Egyptian world from pre-dynastic times over 5,000 years ago all the way to the 5th century AD. Most of us can't imagine ancient Egypt without it. But when did this writing originate? How did it develop? And is it the oldest writing system in the world? Or does that honor belong to the early cuneiform system that developed in southern Mesopotamia? We'll take a look at these and other questions in this program. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce and thank the sponsor of this video, Babbel. Now, it's still summer, and many of us are planning vacations to different parts of the globe, which means meeting new people, traveling to new places, and of course, new experiences. And what better way to really immerse yourself in whatever foreign destination you may be going to than to learn a bit of the local language? That's where Babbel comes in. It's a language learning app that uses quick, interactive lessons based on real-world conversations. In the past, I'd used all of these books to help me to learn Portuguese, but now I just use Babbel to brush up on my language skills, especially with regard to the weather. Something that was always difficult for me to remember, but that Babbel helps me with. A previsão do tempo para amanhã é boa. It's definitely a lot more fun. And more importantly, I feel much more prepared for my future trips to some of Brazil and South America's greatest historical sites. So if you'd like to become conversational in a new language, whether it be Spanish, French, Polish, German, even Indonesian, in as little as 3 weeks, then sign up for Babbel today. Click on the link in the video description for 65% off your subscription. Try Babbel today. In 1900, what became known as the Narmer palette was discovered at the site of Hierakonpolis in Egypt. Known as Nekin in the ancient Egyptian language, it dated to the reign of one of Egypt's first historical rulers, a king named Narmer. It also contained one of the first examples of Egyptian hieroglyphs, used in this case to glorify the king and preserve a record of his achievements. Almost a century later, in 1987, German archaeologists excavating at the Royal Cemetery of Abydos, just a few hundred kilometers northwest of Hierakonpolis, discovered the tomb of one of Egypt's pre-dynastic kings, dating to perhaps 3200 BC. Labeling it UJ, the tomb contained many artifacts, among them several hundred tags, or labels, about 2 to 3 centimeters square, and inscribed with various pictographs. Each label had a hole in one corner so that it could be attached by a string or a cord to a particular container, such as a jar or a box. Unlike the signs and symbols on the Narmer palette, these were not used to glorify the king, but for the more mundane purpose of identifying commodities such as wine, beer, grain, and other foodstuffs, as well as where these objects may have come from. These tags are the earliest known examples of an actual writing system in Egypt. Evidence of some form of record keeping goes back even further still. In the 19th century, the great archaeologist Flinders Petrie discovered several pots with what at first glance looked like ordinary scratches. Upon further examination, it became obvious that these marks were scratched onto the pots intentionally. So numerous and diverse were these marks that it was later concluded that they constituted some sort of recording system. While originally some believed these to have been a proto-form of writing, modern studies have shown that these pot marks are not related to the Egyptian hieroglyphs that we know of today, and are more of a recording system than a written language. Egyptologists are still not sure if Egyptian hieroglyphs evolved gradually over several generations, or if they were invented all at once for a specific purpose by scribes or the royal court for recording information, such as keeping track of commodities in palace storerooms. If it is indeed true that these labels from Tomb UJ date to 3200 BC, and that they are a form of early hieroglyphs, does this make them the earliest form of writing in the world? Or does that honor go to the cuneiform script that originated in Mesopotamia, specifically the southern part that we recognize as the ancient land of Sumer. Before the discovery of Tomb Uj, it was generally accepted that the Sumerians were the first to have developed a full writing system. We've covered the evolution of cuneiform in some detail in past programs, so I'm not going to cover it here. To learn more about that, you can check out the links in the video description. With regard to the age of the cuneiform system, tablets from the once great city of Uruk in southern Iraq, with an early form of proto-cuneiform writing, have been dated to around 3400 to 3300 BC, which would make them older than the hieroglyphs discovered in Tomb Uj. However, Dr. Gunther Dreyer, the archaeologist who discovered Tomb Uj, disagrees, and along with other Egyptologists, argues that the writing discovered there is older than any from Mesopotamia. As proof, he states that radiocarbon dating of some of the artifacts within the tomb, such as linen, indicates that it was built a century or so before the earliest known cuneiform tablets discovered in Mesopotamia. It should be noted, though, that for such old remains, there's a margin of error of at least 100 years, so it really can't be conclusively proven whether or not the writing discovered in Tomb Uj is in fact older than the cuneiform system developed in Mesopotamia. It's also possible that both systems may have been invented around the same time. As you can imagine, there's a bit of a rivalry between Egyptologists and Assyriologists as to which region invented the earliest true writing system, though most who study antiquity maintain the belief that writing originated in Mesopotamia. Due to the economic and cultural exchanges between the two regions that occurred in early antiquity, many historians have tried to prove that the Egyptians may have got the idea or concept of writing from traders in the Eastern Mediterranean who were from Uruk or Sumer. However, when you study them in more depth, you come to realize that Egyptian hieroglyphs are specifically designed to express the nuances of the ancient Egyptian language, and don't really have much in common with the cuneiform system of Mesopotamia. Thus, if the ancient Egyptians could create such a beautiful writing system that was so representative of their own language and its subtleties, as well as their local environment and specific needs, could they not have then also independently invented writing for themselves? Since the days of Egypt's first recorded dynasties, the written word was an extremely important part of ancient Egyptian civilization. Within no time, Egyptian hieroglyphs were used to record not just economic data or short royal proclamations, but also epic poetry, biographies, and the history of one of the longest continuous civilizations that the world has ever known. But what do you think? Were Egyptian hieroglyphs developed independently of writing in Mesopotamia? Let me and the community of viewers know in the comments below. As always, thanks so much for watching. I'd also really like to thank Grankek69, Yap de Graaf, Pasta Frola, Michael Lewis, Daniel Allen, Danny Van Eck, Wenix TV, Robert Morgan, Frank, Tim Lane, Sebastian Hurtado Correa, Michael Trudell, John Scarberry, Andrew Bomer, Monty Grimes, Franz Robbins, Brendan Redman, Faridun Dadachanji, Jimmy Daruwala, Anahita Debu, Sher Kam, Farhad Kama, and all of the channel's patrons on Patreon for helping to support this and all future content. Check out the benefits to being a Patreon member, and if you'd like to join, feel free to click the link in the video description. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as continue to listen to special audio programs on the History with Sai podcast. Thanks again, and stay safe.